Isaiah 58, verse 6. It says this, "Is not this the fast that I have chosen? To loose the bands of wickedness," what we talked about last week, "and to undo heavy burdens," that's this week, "and to let the oppressed go free, and to break every yoke." Remember that as God is talking to the children of Israel, they had been doing all the things. They had been going to temple. They had been doing the sacrifices. They had been actually fasting. And it's funny, during the time of Jesus, the Pharisees would fast twice a week. They were doing all the things that they should have been doing, but their heart wasn't right. You see, you can do the right things with the wrong heart and God won't bless it. And so our heart during this God fast is that we wouldn't just do them to do them, but that we would fast from the things that God has called us to fast from, that we would be changed from the inside out. This wouldn't just be an exterior thing. It would be, God, replace this heart of mine. Change this heart of stone into a heart of flesh. And so this week we're talking about undoing heavy burdens, undoing emotional weight. Whether that be fear or worry, doubt, anxiety, guilt, shame. I found that sometimes the heaviest burdens that we bear are often unseen, aren't they? Sometimes the hardest things that we deal with, people have no idea what's actually going on. And sometimes I'd say many of us are prisoners in our own minds, aren't we? We can't escape. We can't get out. Anxieties and worries, doubts, it constantly seems to lay siege on our mind. Man, it's like you think about it all day and you go down to rest because your body's just fatigued from thinking and worrying all day. And then you go down and you lay down, and then what happens when you lay down? You continually ponder all the things that might be, could be, and maybe will be. The things you said to someone that you have maybe misconstrued in your mind, that man, do they mean this like this? Man, I shouldn't have said it this way. They probably think this of me now. And it's like we just run it through our minds constantly, and there's just this emotional weight on us, this emotional burden on us that it seems like we can't get free from. I'm sure many of you know what I'm talking about. It says that they say that a third of adults in America are on some form of antidepressant pill, some form of anxiety medication. I led teen group for 10 years, and it was actually uncommon for someone not to deal with anxiety. It was like it was everywhere. It was so prominent, especially among the youth. And I want to make a disclaimer, okay? Because I don't want the devil to get in your mind and make you think other things. Here's my disclaimer. I believe in a holistic life, meaning this. I don't think it's just pray the depression away. Like you're depressed because you're not praying enough. It's not. If you hear that in the message, know that that is not my heart at all. God made us mind, body, and soul. And so if any one of those, if your spiritual life is off, guess what? It's going to hinder the other two. But guess what? If you're doing the right thing spiritually, but you're just watching TV and on social media all day long, guess what? It's going to wreck your mind. If you're never exercising, you're never working your body, it's going to wreck your life. And so every area, I believe in a holistic life, that it takes every area to be healthy. And if one's off, then they'll all be off. And so that's my disclaimer. But listen, I'm a pastor, okay? My job is to speak to the spiritual. And here's what I believe, is that when we're facing anxiety, when we're facing depression, that it's the first step starts with surrender. The first step starts with the spiritual. The first step starts with coming before God and saying, God, I need your help on this. I want to give you a story. Not really a story. It's actually happened. I was maybe 3 or 4 years into ministry. I think about 3 years into ministry. I had been teaching youth group. I had been doing all these things. In this night particular, man, it was like things were going awry. I remember going and teaching, and I remember going into the youth group just thinking, I just want to be done with teaching today. I'm over this. I'm done. I just want to, let's hurry up and make this lesson. Let's put on a smile, get through this. And then my plan was after youth group tonight, I was going to go take my life in ministry. And like I said, some of the most unseen burdens happen in our mind. And so I felt like a profound level of guilt and shame about this. Because it's like, man, if anyone shouldn't be struggling, it should be me. Like I shouldn't have to go to someone because I'm in ministry. And there was like this perception that I felt like I had to put on. And I remember just like being crushed under the weight, just anxious about everything, worried about people's perception, worried that I wasn't doing enough, worried that I wasn't good enough, worried that maybe all of these good things that were happening in my life were just temporary and they would all actually fall apart. And I remember it just being like a storm of thoughts. Like I could barely, maybe if you deal with this, you understand what I'm talking about. Like there are so many thoughts happening that you can barely distinguish between the thoughts. And it's like almost like a storm of thoughts in your mind. When I would tell people what it was like, I'd say it's like standing next to a train track as a train is going by you. And you can hear it, you can hear the metal grinding on the wheels, you can hear the loudness, you can feel the vibrations, but it's just disorienting. And I remember feeling that way. And after church, I remember Rachel texting me like, hey, like, are you good? Like something seems off tonight. And I was like, yeah, I'm fine, everything's fine. And I remember right after church going down to the bridge in Maysville, planning to go down there and take my life. And it was only by God's grace that I didn't. I remember I was down there and really it was the Lord and the youth kids that kept me from it. Because my thought was, how many of them are dealing with the same thing that I was dealing with? It's like how many, and what kind of legacy would I leave to them to know like the youth leader they looked up to succumbed to it? And I remember just being broken about that. And this verse came to my mind and really changed everything. It said, the thief cometh not but for to steal and to kill and to destroy. But I am come that you might have life and that you might have it more abundantly. And I'm thinking, man, this doesn't feel like life. This doesn't feel like the abundant life. And so then I remember meeting with my pastor and just like opening up to people about what was going on. And I really began this journey of like letting these things go. But it all started in this one place, surrender. The bridge where I thought I would take my life became the symbol of my surrender, where I like really laid it down before God and said, God, all of this is yours. All of these worries and anxiety, God, all of my insecurities, God, they're yours. Surrender is the first step to overcoming these emotional burdens. But surrender's hard, isn't it? Because in order to surrender, you have to trust. And trust is a hard thing. Maybe some of you, you're like me. I remember in my life, like I had so many people leave my life. It's like they would show up just long enough for me to get attached and then they'd walk out. And it was like, man, it was like constantly being hurt. And so my ideas was I was going to block myself in. Man, I was going to build this wall through worries and anxieties. I wasn't going to let people hurt me again. Through my insecurities, I built these walls up against the world to protect myself. But you know what I found? Is that the walls that I built to protect myself actually trapped me. And I didn't have anybody to trust. And I didn't trust anyone. And what I found was I said I trusted God, but I really didn't. Because what if God was like everybody else? What if he walked away like everyone else? What if he hurt me like everybody else hurt me? I'm just not going to trust again. And the walls that trap me, listen to me, the walls that trap us are almost impossible for us to break. But that's where God comes in. That's where the surrender comes in. That's where trusting God comes in to break down the walls that we have built. All right, go to Mark chapter 4. Mark chapter 4. We're going to talk about a story of Jesus taking his disciples on an ocean, and things get a little crazy. Things go a little awry. And we'll see what happens. Mark chapter number 4, verse 35. Mark 4:35. Mark 4:35. Here's what it says. And the same day, when the evening was come, he, Jesus, said unto them, let us pass over unto the other side. And when they had sent away the multitudes, he took him even as he was in the ship. And there was also with him other little ships. And there arose a great storm of wind, and waves beat upon the ship, so that it was now full. And he was in the hinder part, Jesus, he was in the hinder part of the ship, asleep on a pillow. And they awake him and said unto him, Master, carest not that we perish? And he arose and rebuked the wind and said unto the sea, Peace, be still. And the wind ceased, and there was a great calm. Man, can you imagine? Now listen, if I was on a boat, if any kind of storm happened, I'd probably freak out, all right? This is how I am. I'm like, we're all going to die. But these were sailors, all right? They were well-versed in how to sail. It's not like they just couldn't figure out what to do. Like they knew exactly what to do. And imagine, these huge waves are going on this ocean, man, just tossing this boat all over the place. Water's coming over. Peter's probably yelling at John to like bail the water faster. All these, hey, man, put the sails up or it's gonna rip the mast off. Like, hey, man, we're all gonna die. Can you imagine this just crazy scene? Everyone's running around this boat, trying to figure out what's going on. The only light they have is from the lightning that's flashing overhead. What a horrible thing. It's one thing to be in a thunderstorm on the ground. It's a whole nother one to be in a thunderstorm on the seas. The other week we had maybe I told you guys this, we had a thunderstorm, and it was like the craziest thunderstorm we'd ever heard here. And man, it was like a big flash of light outside our window. I thought the rapture was happening, maybe didn't. A little disappointed. And then it was like a thunder, but it was probably a good 10, 15 seconds. I mean, it was a long, like just shook our house. And I'm thinking like, is this what a tornado feels like? Like I'm about to just, get lifted off the bed and just thrown somewhere. And I was just accepting it, as long as I got my blanket. Don't want to be immodest when I hit the ground and people find me. That was literally my concern. It really was. I was thinking about going and putting shorts on because I don't want to be found immodest. That was my initial thought. But man, imagine being on the ocean and these things are happening. Like man, it is shaking the ship and they're freaking out and they're like, man, this is it. Like this is the end. And Jesus is asleep on a pillow. John runs like, hey, wake up, Jesus. We're literally going to die out here. Like this is it. Look outside. It's coming down. We're about to take on too much water. And I want us to notice 4 things here. 4 things. Let's notice these 4 things. 1, the perception of danger was real, wasn't it? There was literally a storm. And these were fishermen. And it was literally going to sink the boat. They were in perceived danger. 2, look at this, the worries that engulfed them. They said what? We perish. Now listen, they weren't literally perishing in the moment. No one had gone over. They didn't lose John off the side. Everyone's still on the boat. The boat hadn't capsized. No one was perishing yet. 3, they assumed that Jesus didn't care. They assumed Jesus didn't care. What did they say? Master, carest not that we perish? And then lastly, they didn't trust. They didn't trust him. Let's hit all these real quick. The truth is that storms make a good representation of how our minds are sometimes, isn't it? The flurry of thoughts, the loudness of our thoughts, the inability sometimes to calm what is happening in our own minds. Our fear attacks, our worry disorients, our anxiety makes peace seem impossible. And there's a real perception of danger in our heads, in our minds. Like there's a danger. Maybe you had been hurt in the past by someone, and so, hey, you put up a wall there. I'm not going to let them hurt me. I'm not going to let anyone hurt me like that again. Wall. And there's this emotional damage. There's this worry. I looked up the top 10 fears of Americans. And they're interesting. Number 4 is cyber attacks, okay? Number 4 is cyber attacks. You want to know what number 5 is? Nuclear war, all right? I think I'm a little more scared of nuclear war than a cyber attack, right? Like, okay, my power goes out versus, radiation and being blown to smithereens. I don't know. Just me, I think nuclear warfare might be a little bit more dangerous. But there's a perception of danger in our life. And the truth is life has no shortage of things to worry about. You can worry yourself to death about everything that happens in life. And the truth is this: majority of the time, we worry and we fret and we fear things that A, maybe won't ever happen or hasn't happened. B, things that we cannot control. Or 3, things that we assume. They think this, they said this is what they actually meant. And we don't know that's what they meant. We don't know that's how they perceived it. Or we worry about things that could be, but it hasn't happened. But what if this happened? But what if that? What if this? What if they do that? And we spend our time and all of our energy thinking about all these things that may never happen. And then 2, look at this. They succumbed to the storm. They said, hey, we perish. Things are just the way they are. I mean, I've met a lot of people who have succumbed to their anxieties and their worries. They've just succumbed. They've just given up. Man, this is how life is now. This is how things are. This is the way my brain, this is the way I'm wired. And there's no going out. There's no help. I've tried before, and this is what it is now. Listen, you don't have to live this way. You don't have to give in. You don't have to roll over and give up. I'm not saying it's going to be easy. I'm not saying it's going to change overnight. But what I'm saying is you can win the battle. God gives us the victory. You don't have to roll over and succumb to the storm. And then lastly, listen, we assume that Jesus doesn't care. We assume that he doesn't care. How many worries do we just cast off in our mind or just ponder thinking that it's not big enough to bring to Jesus? Like Jesus probably doesn't care about this. You want to know why Jesus was asleep in the boat? Because he knew the boat wasn't going down. He knew they would be okay. He wasn't worried about the storm because he knew that his Father had a purpose for him and that his Father was going to get him through. And listen, the same God that slept in the boat lives in you. If you're saved, if you're a believer, the same God that slept in the middle of a tempest lives inside of you. And so why are you worried? Why do you doubt? Why are you overcome with anxieties? Put your trust in him. Put your faith in him. And Jesus does care. Listen, he has every hair of your head numbered. He formed you in the womb. Like he knows everything about you and he cares about you. He wouldn't have died for you if he didn't care. He cares for you. I love what John 14:27 says, because how many of us live in complete opposite of what this says? Peace I leave with you. My peace I give unto you, the same peace that slept on the boat. Not as the world giveth, give I unto you. Let not your hearts be troubled, neither be afraid. I was researching this a while back, and it's kind of cool. They obviously, we have the brain is connected to your neurological system, right? But it's really interesting because they started researching the neural networks that are in your heart. And they found that sometimes the heart would act independent of the mind. The neural networks in the heart would act independent of the mind. Have you ever had anxiety so bad it hurt your heart? Or worry so bad that your heart raced? Like, we can feel anxiety and worry in our chest. And he said this, let not your heart be troubled. Like, Jesus has overcome the world. He's overcome hell and death. And he said, I leave my peace with you. And the last thing is this, they didn't trust him. Listen to what he said to the storm. The storm is raging, man. It is going, they're thinking we're going to die. Look at what he says in verse 39. He says, and he arose and rebuked the wind and said unto the sea, peace, be still. And the winds ceased. And there was a great what? Calm. There was a great calm. It wasn't like, okay, the waves, no. It was like there was never a storm to begin with. There was a calm on the ocean. And man, I'm telling you, some of us, man, our minds are raging. Our thoughts are just all over the place. We're riddled with anxiety and doubt and worries and fears. And we don't want to trust Jesus. We don't want to give up control. We don't want to believe that he can truly calm the storm. And it's like, okay, Jesus, like I got to trust you with this. And listen to me, if Jesus can calm a storm in 3 words, then I promise you he can calm the storm raging in your mind in 1 prayer. He can. I mean, do we believe this or not? If we believe that he died on a cross for us to pay for all of the wrong, all of the sin that I committed in my life, and he overcame sin, hell, and death, then man, the worries that I have in my mind, in my heart, my mind is nothing to him to overcome. You know what the scripture says? That he will keep our hearts and minds in perfect peace, whose mind is stayed on him. The truth is it comes down to this. Do we believe what Jesus said or not? And this might be a hard here for some to hear. Do you believe what Jesus said or not? Do you believe that he can leave his peace with you? Do you truly believe he can calm the storms in your mind? Do you truly believe that he's greater than the worries and anxieties that you have? And I'm not saying this as someone who is apart from all of this. I'm someone that struggles and has struggled with worry and anxieties, has fears. Look at what Jesus said to them. Verse 40, it says, and he said unto them, why are you so fearful? It's funny. Being in the middle of a storm is a pretty fearful thing, right? Why are you so fearful? How is it that you have no faith? And I love the next verse even more because it says, and they feared exceedingly. So it's like, why are you so fearful? And then the next verse is like, they feared even more. Why are you so fearful? And how is it that you have no faith? What faith is this. Faith believes that God can, despite the present circumstances, despite the storm, despite the situation, despite how things look. Despite all of those things, faith believes that God can. And you want to know at the root of almost all anxiety, almost all worry, almost all doubt, you want to know what all that's rooted in? It's rooted in fear. When you travel upstream of all of these things, you'll find fears at the root. Something has happened. Fear of loss. For me, it was fear of abandonment, fear of rejection, fear of being used, fear of criticism, fears of not being enough. At the root of all of these things, it's I'm afraid. I'm fearful, God. And the truth is a lot of the times we hold our fears with as tight of a fist as we can. Like, God, I can't trust you with this. Because God, if I trust you with this, what if it happens again? What if they hurt me again? What if they reject me again, God? What if you reject me? God, can I actually trust you with my heart? Because every time I've trusted other people with my heart, they've always hurt it. God, can I actually open up? God, can you actually break down the walls? God, can you actually remove the burdens? It comes down to this. God, can I actually trust you with what I'm fearful of? I love what Jackie Hill Perry said. She said this: if God is perfect, then that means he cannot sin. Everyone agree with that? Okay. 3 head nods, okay. Next week, we're going to preach about that. God cannot sin. I knew I was going to do that. If God is perfect, that means he cannot sin, okay? If God cannot sin, that means that he cannot sin against you. And if God cannot sin against you, shouldn't that make him the most trustworthy person there is? I mean, think about this. Even the closest people in your life, your husband, your spouse, or your husband, your wife, your children, your best friend, like all these people, your pastor, like we can all sin against each other because we're sinful. But God isn't sinful. And so if he's not sinful, then that means he can't sin against you. And if he can't sin against you, then shouldn't he be the most trustworthy person there is on earth or in our lives? So why are we so fearful to trust? All right, last part. Let's go to this. Philippians. This will be the application. We'll wrap it up here. Philippians, chapter number 4. Here's the practical side. Philippians chapter number 4, verse number 6. Philippians 4:6. It says this: be careful for what? Be careful for nothing. Now, when I first read the word careful, I thought it meant like being stealthy. No, that's not what careful means. It means full of care. He says, hey, don't be full of care for anything. How much? Nothing. Zilch, zero, nada, nothing. Don't be fearful. Don't be careful about anything. But he's not saying that. He goes on further, because a lot of times that's where we stop, isn't it? All right, don't be fearful for anything. Don't be careful for anything. Don't be careful for anything. But it's not that we're just emptying our minds like a monk of our worries and doubts. But we aren't just emptying, we're replacing. Okay? This is where we get it wrong. Here's what it says. Be careful for what? Nothing. But in everything, by prayer and supplication with thanksgiving, let your requests be made known unto God. The first step is to trust God. Give your request to God. I don't care how big or how small it is. If it's enough for you to worry about, it's enough to bring it to God and say, here, God, this is what I'm worried about. I'm putting it in your hands, and I'm going to leave it there. I'm going to trust that you are going to work this all out for good. I'm not going to worry about it. I'm not going to think about it. I'm not going to fear about it. The second step is this: shift your focus. Be careful for nothing, but in everything by prayer and supplication, let your requests be made known unto God. And the peace of God, which passeth all understanding, shall keep your heart and your mind. Shall keep your heart and your mind through Christ Jesus. Finally, brethren, whatsoever things are true, whatsoever things are honest, whatsoever things are just, whatsoever things are pure, whatsoever things are lovely, whatsoever things are of good report, if there be any virtue, if there be any praise, think on these things. Listen to what he says. If there be any truth. You know, man, we can be so quick to assume what people meant by something, to attribute a motive to how someone said something, to what they actually meant it like this. Maybe they think this of me now, that they kind of acted a little weird. Man, maybe they think this. If you don't know it to be true, don't think on it. Assume the best. Well, maybe they were tired. Maybe they just had a rough week. Maybe they're going through a lot. Maybe I need to pray for them instead of assuming in my mind what I think they know or what I think they meant. Let me pray for them instead. Listen to what he says. Whatsoever things are honest, whatsoever things are just, whatsoever things are pure, whatsoever things are lovely. Man, let's think on the scriptures. Let's think on God. Let's think on things that will matter in eternity. Let's think on things that are praiseworthy and lovely and good. So it's not just about getting the worry out of our mind, but it's about shifting our focus onto the things that God wants us to have our minds on the things that are lovely and good and that will build us up and edify us. That will encourage us. So it's about shifting our focus. But listen to this. This is conditional. Verse 9, those things which ye have both learned and received and heard and seen in me, do, and the peace of God shall be with you. James talks about being a hearer of the word, but not a doer. You hear it. You hear a lot. You hear all the things. And maybe today you're like, oh, I know that. I've heard that. Then do it. Because hearers of the word aren't just blessed, but the doers are. We can know all the things, but if we're not actively living them out in our lives, then there will be no change. He says, don't just hear it, don't just see it, don't just receive it, but actually do it. Shift the focus of your mind. Man, when those thoughts come up, when those worries and anxieties come up, that emotional burden that I pray that you wrote on your card, when that comes up, man, say, no, I am dead to that thing. I'm dead to that worry and that fear. I'm surrendering it to God. Lord, it is yours. I'm trusting you in all things. And now I'm going to shift my focus and I'm going to think on things that are lovely and pure. Man, what can I thank God for today? What can I rejoice on today? Storms are common on the sea, aren't they? It's a normal occurrence. And so are worries in this life. Like I said, the world has no shortage of things for you to worry about, things for you to be emotionally burdened by. But you let them take captive of your mind. There's very little things we have control over in our lives. One thing we do have control over is our minds. You can decide what to think on. You can decide, I'm not going to think on this anymore. I'm not going to dwell on this. I'm going to dwell on things that are pure and lovely and good. I'm going to trust God to still the storm in me and to bring peace into my life. He promised it. And the God that we serve is not a liar. And if He promised peace, then that means that peace can be a reality in your life if you'll trust Him. And I'm speaking from experience. So here's my challenge this week. 1, give up your emotional burdens. Whatever it is. What emotional thing do you just constantly, is just eating at your mind nonstop? Maybe it's worry. Maybe it's what other people think about you. Maybe it's a fear of something that might happen. Maybe it's an anxiety. What is it that is consuming your mind that you need to say, I'm going to fast from this. I'm going to give this to God and I'm going to trust Him that He can overcome it. And I'm going to challenge you to lay it at His feet. Like I said, we have an altar. Y'all, this isn't up here for show. Man, there are scriptures written on here. Who knows if there's a scripture up here that would bless you? We have an altar. Man, come and lay it at the altar. Lay it before the feet of Christ. Like, listen, God, Of course, you can pray in your seat, but there is something special about praying at an altar. Come up with someone else. Remember I said last week that you wouldn't go to war by yourself, would you? So why do we think we're going to go to war with the devil by ourselves? Why are we going to go to war with our own flesh by ourselves? That sounds like a terrible thing to do, doesn't it? I want some brothers in arms. I want someone to fight with me. And man, it is so helpful when you have that. Because guess what? You can bounce ideas off other people. Like, hey man, here's the worry I'm dealing about. What do you think? And if you have a good friend, they'll probably be like, you're being a little wild about it. Like they probably didn't mean that at all. They probably didn't think that at all. Or maybe they'll be like, hey, let's just pray about it together. Let's go and fight together. Let's not fight alone. And then lastly is this, to change our focus. If you're worried and riddled with anxiety, remember, we're not just fasting just to give up stuff. We're fasting to replace something. So we're giving up our emotional burdens this week, and we're replacing it with things that are pure and holy and good. And we're thinking about things of God and not of the things on this world.